Need the TV remote?
All right, we're ready to start.
Yeah, okay, I'll be right there.
Okay. So, we had a little confusion about where we're starting. We're in chapter 7.
Okay.
Okay. So, remember that chapter 6 has the kind of the most important verses in the book of Deuteronomy to the Jews. 6:4 is, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your might." And then after that, it goes on and talks about the fact of keep them with you, teach them to your children. Then in verse 10, he gets into, hey, whenever you move into places where you didn't build them and you didn't plant the vineyards and you're well off because of other things, don't go chasing after other gods. Instead, remember what God has done. And then in verse 20, then it says, when your children ask, why do we do this? Well, then you tell them because of what God has done. Okay. Chapter 7 moves on. It says, when the Lord your God brings you into the land that you are entering to take possession of it and clears away many nations before you. Okay. The Hittites, the Girgashites, the Amorites, the Canaanites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites. Okay. I had somebody who always called them the Ite boys. Okay. They're the Ite boys. 7 nations more numerous and mightier than you. And when the Lord your God gives them over to you and you defeat them, then you must devote them to complete destruction. Okay. So what he's getting into is the idea that when you defeat one of these people that live in the land, you are to completely destroy them. Okay. You shall make no covenant with them and show no mercy to them. Okay. Now, this sounds really, really harsh. Okay. But there are 2 elements that we have to deal with real quick as we work through this idea. First, God had given them time to turn. Okay. These others. Okay. We've mentioned this before, but in Genesis, when he talks to Abraham about the idea of when he talks about the moving into Egypt, one of the things he says is so that the sins of the Amorites might become complete. So the 400 years in Egypt is not only something for the Hebrews, but it is a 400-year span for the Hittites and the Girgashites and the Amorites and the Canaanites and all of that to have an opportunity to turn back to the Lord. Okay, and they did not do that. So they are no longer deserving of mercy. Okay, they have crossed past the level of receiving mercy. Now, that is an interesting discussion. But remember that even for the children of Israel later, there is a moment, and it talks about in Hosea, that one of the children of Gomer, who is Hosea's wife, who is unfaithful, his name is Lo Ami, which means no mercy. And the name actually says, you have sinned so much against me, I'm no longer going to show you any mercy. Okay, so the idea is mercy, remember, is not getting what you do deserve.
Yeah.
Okay, so when we talk about mercy and grace, mercy is not getting what you do deserve. Grace is getting what you don't deserve. Okay, one of the best ways I ever heard explained is, so if you, for example, since we've been talking about homework, okay, you don't do your homework. Mercy is your teacher giving you another opportunity. Grace would be her doing it for you. Right. Grace would be her doing it for you and you getting her grade. Okay. So You will show them no mercy. Why? Because they have, and this is really the idea. They have trampled on my mercy and grace for so long, they have exhausted it. Okay. Then the second thing comes in verse 3. You will not intermarry with them.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, by the way, that's the reason you don't make any covenant with them. You destroy them. That way there's no temptation
To marry their daughters.
to marry their daughters or to give your daughters to them. Now, why? Well, because if you marry their daughter, then their daughter's going to bring their gods into your tent.
Yeah.
And it will lead you into idolatry. By the way, it's exactly what this says. You shall not intermarry with them, giving your daughters to their sons or taking their daughters for your sons. For they would turn away your sons from following me to serve other gods. Then the anger of the Lord would be kindled against you, and he would destroy you quickly. Okay. By the way, don't miss this. There are two things, and this comes up later, but there are two things later in Deuteronomy, okay, that are mentioned about the king that is going to come. Okay. So it's chapter 17 of Deuteronomy. We're going to see this idea. And it's, there will come a day where you'll decide you want a king. Now, here's the qualifications. Okay. One of the qualifications is that there were two things that he was absolutely above anything not to do. Not to collect for himself horses or wives.
Why horses?
Because the horse was a symbol of
Prosperity.
worldly military might. Okay. But for the wives discussion, it is exactly this. And by the way, don't miss this. That is the fatal flaw for Solomon. And it says, he followed the Lord, except in the matter of, and then he allowed them to turn him into some idolatry. Okay. So, the anger of the Lord will be kindled against you, be destroyed quickly. But thus shall you deal with them. You shall break down their altars and dash in pieces their pillars and chop down their asherim and burn their carved images with fire. Okay. So altars would be stone with mortar. Okay. By the way, this is something you see in Exodus. God tells the children of Israel, never use mortar in one of your altars to me.
Have to be able to freestand.
And never cut the rock. It's just to be plain rocks. Okay. Because part of this pagan worship was building these really ornate stone altars in which to burn their sacrifices. When you see them, you break them apart and you scatter the stones. You dash in pieces the pillars. You shatter the pillars and spread them. You chop down their asherim. The asherim is a wooden pole. By the way, just so that we're completely clear how this works. An asherim was a wooden pole to a pagan goddess. And the wooden pole symbolized a certain part of the male anatomy.
But that's, like the Indians have totem poles. Does that be the same thing?
Sort of.
But do the Indians worship
Yes.
those? I can't remember.
Now, maybe not so much anymore, but yes, those are gods.
They were gods on the.
Well, I know
thought
that-
there were tribes.
I know that
They are part
do
of their
not allow
religious.
others to imitate them.
Uh-huh.
If they make one, it has to be totally different than what the
Anybody else?
well, yeah, I guess it would be then.
Let me look, but I'm pretty sure that that is the case. So, well, it's ancestor worship. A pole or pillar carved and painted with a series of totemic symbols representing family lineage and often mythical or historical incidences, and erected by Indian tribes of the Northwest coast in North America. So it is ancestor worship. Okay. By the way, if you ever look at Roman culture, ancestor worship was a big thing there. They would have little statues of their family.
Oh, really?
By the way, if you really want to be completely fair in the way this works, it is where Roman Catholicism got the idea of the guardian angel. It's the same kind of picture. What they believed in ancestor worship was that your grandfather watched over you and protected you and your family. And
Well, then so did the Indians. The great,
Basically.
the great-
right,
Yeah, and they prayed to the creator or to the grandfather.
right.
The Father Earth and Mother, no,
Father Sky, Mother Earth.
Yeah.
Almost always.
yeah.
The sky is male and the earth is female.
Because it produces life.
That's true in Greek mythology too.
Is it?
Yeah,
Uranos is the sky and Gaia is the earth. But the idea here, and it's important that we get this, is whatever their symbols of worship are, be they clay figures, be they stone figures, be they golden figures, be they wooden figures, whatever, destroy them immediately. Okay. Why? For you are a people holy to the Lord your God. Now, this is important that we get this word right, because sometimes we get confused here. What does the word holy mean? Set apart. Okay. We discuss the idea sometimes as, well, you're a holy, you're good. It's not necessarily what it means. You are set apart by God to be his. Okay. By the way, I heard a deal today. I thought it was very, very funny, talking about some of the things that we have issues with within our Christian culture today. And one of them is we treat choosing to follow Christ lightly. Come pray this little prayer and then you're good.
Yeah.
Okay. The Bible speaks of it like marriage. Okay. And this was a very interesting discussion that I never thought of. The truth of what it means to marry someone. Okay. So if whenever I say I do, what I have said, supposedly, is that I have now said, I say yes to her and I've said no to every other woman on the planet ever.
That's how I felt when I got married, or that's what I thought my marriage was going to be like till he started pimping me out again.
So, but understand the idea here. Okay. If that's what it's supposed to be with God, then it's not just, okay, I accept you as my savior. It's, I am choosing to reject all that I was.
Oh, and that's so hard sometimes.
Now, the funny thing is, and part of this discussion, do there come points that you miss it? Yeah.
Oh, boy.
But that should be something that you repent of.
Oh, dang.
It should be something that you turn, when you miss what you were, then you go, no, wait. I have something better.
Yeah.
And you turn from that desire. Well, that is part of this discussion. You are a people who have been set apart to the Lord. All those things you used to be need to go away. Okay. So the Lord your God has chosen you to be a people for his treasured possession. So, by the way, once again, marriage language. Okay. When you become married, you become each other's treasured possession, or you should. Okay. Now, let me say that's not popular at all in our culture to say, to call, but it's not just, well, she's my possession. It's also, I'm her possession.
Yeah, and it's a lot the other way.
Right.
I own her,
So
but I can still do what I
the
want.
Lord your God has chosen you. He has chosen to say yes to you and to say no to all others. And in the same way, you need to choose to say yes to him and say no to all others. Out of all the people who are on the face of the earth. Okay, so, we talk about Israel being maybe a million, 1.5 million, maybe 2 million at this point. In comparison to the population of the earth, that's nothing. Especially then when you add all people who've ever lived ever.
Yeah, that's true.
And God chose them to be his people. Now, I understand that we would go, well, but I'm not the only person who, okay, but you were chosen as if you were.
And these people that were Israelites, the ones we're talking about now, were the Jews, right?
They are.
Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay, so they're the Jews,
This is the old covenant.
the old covenant.
Uh-huh.
And they refused to see the new covenant, which a lot of them refused to see the new
Right.
covenant with Jesus.
Okay. So it's not because you were more in number than any other people that the Lord set his love upon you and chose you. So, by the way, it's not about your strength or your ability or that you are the best or any of those things. It's simply because God loves you. See, this is how he says it is not because you were more in number than any other people that the Lord set his love on you and chose you, for you are the fewest of all peoples. But it is because the Lord loves you and is keeping the oath that he swore to your fathers. Now, remember when they traveled into Egypt. Okay, so let's go back that far.
Okay.
In Genesis, the end of Genesis, they travel into Egypt. How many were there?
Not a lot.
70.
I was gonna say like
There are the entire Jacob and his entire children, grandchildren, all of that went from Canaan into Egypt was 70 persons.
But when they left, they were numerous.
They were much bigger,
Yeah.
but they are still a small people.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's not because of their might or anything like that. It's because the Lord loves you and is keeping a promise he made. So watch. It really doesn't have anything to do with you and anything special about you. It's simply because God promised and he always keeps his promises. The same thing is true of us today. It's not because we're something special that God chooses to save us. It is simply the fact that he made a promise.
Mhm.
It is his faithfulness that causes him to choose us.
I got questions.
Yes.
Because now my head's rocking on that. There were 70 of them that went into Egypt.
Yes.
So does that mean there's 7 different tribes, one for
No.
each brother? Then how do we end up with 12 tribes? if
There
was
are
only 7?
there are 13.
Okay.
There are technically 13 brothers or 12 brothers, and then when we talk about the tribes, there are 11 of the brothers who got land.
Okay.
But Joseph got a double portion, and so the tribes are named after his 2 sons. So tribe 11 and 12 are technically the tribe of Joseph, but we call them Ephraim and Manasseh because Ephraim and Manasseh are the 2 sons of Joseph.
Okay, so okay, that makes sense.
So Jacob,
Yeah.
okay, and as far as we can tell at this point, both of his wives had died.
Okay.
So Jacob, each of the 12 sons of Jacob,
Yeah.
and their extended family make up 70 persons.
Yeah. Well, I was just counting the
Right.
women, because the
Right.
women don't.
No, in this case, the women counted.
Okay.
Okay, so it would have been Judah and his wife, and
Okay, so the women counted in the
Right.
70. Okay.
well, let's go back and double check. 'Cause I'm pretty sure that's how that works. So Genesis chapter 50, I think.
I started the Bible over again just a couple of days ago. Chapter 50, right here, And Joseph fell on his father's face.
Okay,
and
so
wept
we're
over him.
going back a couple of chapters.
Jacob blessed Ephraim and Manasseh.
Uh-huh.
Is that where you're looking
And
at?
it may actually be at the beginning of Exodus. Let me double check. I got to thinking about it. I think it actually tells us.
I've been super okay. Beginning of Exodus,
Okay, there we go. So
Israel increases greatly.
these are the names. So verse 1 of chapter 1 of Exodus says, these are the names of the sons of Israel who came to Egypt with Jacob, each with his household, which would include wife
Women
and children. Okay. Not servants or anything, but just wife and children.
Okay.
Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Issachar, Zebulun, Benjamin, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, and Asher. Okay.
All sons of Jacob.
Right. All the descendants of Jacob were 70 persons. Joseph was already in Egypt. Okay, so Joseph, his wife, and his two sons are already in Egypt. So
That makes up the 11.
that makes up, and that makes up the 70. Okay, 70 persons is all of the
All
children.
the other brothers
Right.
besides the one that got sold.
Right.
Gotcha.
Okay. Then Joseph dies. The children of the people of Egypt mourn over him. And then a generation comes, maybe, we don't know exactly, about 30 years. So somewhere around 30 years. And then at the end of that 30 years, another Pharaoh comes who did not have Joseph, who had not
known
Joseph. And he looks and sees that this 70 persons has already moved into thousands because they're
God's
breeding like rabbits.
Yeah.
By the way, there's a guy in Judges who had 30 sons and 30 daughters.
Yeah. Holy moly. God bless that man. No
Okay.
wonder they buried
God
their
bless that
daughter
woman.
young.
Okay.
Poor woman.
But- But probably we're talking about multiple wives too.
Hopefully, we're hoping so.
But there is a guy in Judges who has 30 sons and 30
Dude,
daughters.
that's so insane.
That's 60 kids.
Uh-huh.
Well,
So,
you wonder how many Solomon had.
but remember, by the way, remember in this discussion though, okay, and it sounds really weird to get into this. They are living in an agrarian society with no mechanized tools. Okay. So a large family meant that your farm ran smoother because you had, so
Multiple
remember,
hands to help.
Jesse has 7 sons and it doesn't even mention the number of daughters.
Yeah. Yes.
So
That makes sense if you're living like that, to have lots of kids so that they can.
and I jokingly
split up
say
the work.
this, and what else did they have to do? I mean, but however this ends up working, the children of Israel go from 70 persons in the space of a few generations, and we don't know exactly how many, but in the space of maybe 50, 60 years, they go from 70 into the thousands. And by the time the 400 years over, they are over 1 million people. They are. And what it says here in Exodus is they began to persecute them, and the more they persecuted them, the faster they bred. And that's the hilarious part is the more they tried to squash them, the bigger they got.
Yeah.
And what Egypt was concerned about, and it says it absolutely clearly that this is the case, Egypt's concern, and the reason that Egypt decided he was going to just hammer on them was what they were afraid of is that if an enemy came and attacked Egypt, then they would employ, the Jews would decide to revolt, and then it would
be a huge number. Because,
right.
And that's why he ordered like all the males
Uh-huh.
that were born to be executed.
Why? Because then you would have to have them marry an Egyptian man, and you'd eventually breed them out.
Yeah.
That was the idea.
Crazy.
Okay.
Which is the idea that one B guy tries to do. Let's delude them with our daughters.
Yeah. Okay. So that the Lord had brought you out with a might. This is verse 8, halfway the second half of verse 8 of Deuteronomy 7. That the Lord has brought you out with a mighty hand and redeemed you from the house of slavery, from the hand of Pharaoh, king of Egypt. Know therefore that the Lord your God is God, faithful God who keeps covenant and steadfast love with those who love him and keep his commandments to 1,000 generations. So know that if you are faithful to God, you will receive blessing for thousands of generations. But, verse 10, and repay to their face those who hate him by destroying them. He will not be slack with one who hates him. He will repay him to his face.
Personal there.
You shall therefore be careful to do the commandment and the statutes and the rules that I command you today. Okay. And because, verse 12, because you listen to these rules and keep and do them, the Lord your God will keep with you the covenant and the steadfast love that he swore to your fathers. So, while you listen to the rules that God has given and obey his commandments, then you will continue to see the steadfast love of God that he promised to your fathers. He will love you, bless you, and multiply you. He will also bless the fruit of your womb, so your children, the fruit of your ground, your grain, your wine, and your oil, the increase of your herds and the young of your flock. By the way, there is a period within Jewish history, and I can't remember where it is, when they were being faithful, and it says there were no miscarriages in Israel. So nobody lost a baby, nobody had a stillborn child.
And I'm sure nobody died in childbirth.
Right. I mean, when God is blessing,
God is blessing abundantly.
okay. So your herds, your flocks in the land that he swore to your fathers to give you. You shall be blessed above all people. There shall not be male or female barren among you or among your livestock. So no one will be unable to have children. The Lord will take away from you all your sickness, and none of the evil diseases of Egypt, which you knew, will he inflict on you. But he will lay them on all those who hate you. And you shall consume all the peoples that the Lord your God will give over to you. Your eye shall not pity them, neither shall you serve their gods, for that would be a snare to you. Okay. So if you say in your heart, okay, so let's, in case you're saying to yourself right now, these nations are greater than I. How can I dispossess them? These nations are huge. How are we going to win? Do not be afraid, but you shall remember what the Lord your God did to Pharaoh and to all of Egypt, the great trials that your eyes saw, the signs, the wonders, the mighty hand, and the outstretched arm by which the Lord your God brought you out. Now remember, yes, go ahead.
But did these people actually see it?
Some of them would have, because they would have been children.
Children, but oh yeah, because it was up to the age of 20.
Everybody who died was over the generation that died was over the age of 20 at the time they got to.
So yeah, so some of them would have. Okay.
I mean, there would have been some young teenagers and children,
but still close enough that they would have been able to.
Right.
Like, we saw this with our eyes. And
right?
this happened, and they all saw God in the camp.
Yes. And then remember that God shows them again, because how do they get into the land of Canaan in the first place?
True.
You know, you would think that, I mean, so many times that these people are protected and you know, everything else around them is going down.
All in the handbasket.
So you would think that they would herd them and
Circle the
care
wagons,
them
yeah.
and just honor them like, we want your God to protect us too, and stuff like that, and treat them special. Instead, they keep trying to destroy them.
Well, but remember that what we're talking about, there's a couple of elements to that. And we'll get into that for a minute, and we'll call it for tonight. But so remember that this battle only has two sides. Okay, you have God's side,
Right.
and you have the enemy side. So what is going on is that, and for the children of Israel, so often the vast majority of Jews don't believe in God.
Really?
Yeah,
Even today.
they are national Jews.
What?
So they are by culture or by nationality, they are Jewish. They are descendant from Jewish people.
Like terrorists.
No, but like Jonathan and Nathan are my children by birth.
Mm-hmm.
So they are part of my family. They're part of my lineage.
Yeah.
No matter what. But a large percentage of those that are by nationality Jewish typically are agnostic anymore. They just don't. They don't.
I figured the Jewish were the strong.
No.
Than the rest of them.
No.
No, I believe, but I figured they was always, because
they're God people.
In fact, you can actually find, and maybe we'll take a week, sometime maybe next month, whenever we're going through getting ready for the wedding and all of that, we'll do a special weekend. We'll do a special 2 times, and I'll show you an interesting discussion on the Exodus. There are Jewish religious leaders who don't believe the Exodus happened.
What?
Well, it's important culturally for us to kind of hold to these traditions that we brought down, but whether the Exodus really occurred really doesn't matter.
I would say it matters. If
I would
Just
to me.
Yeah.
But remember that often nationalistic Jews say, well, if there is a God, he's pretty capricious and we really don't know how to please him. But understand, okay, the enemy is not Israel. The enemy is Israel's God. Okay, so let's look at all the things that have gone on. Because a lot of the issues that have gone on between the world powers and Israel actually have to do with Jesus. Okay, so in Revelation, it tells us that Jesus will return to Israel on the Mount of Olives, which is on the western side of the city of Jerusalem. If Israel doesn't hold Jerusalem, then Jesus can't come back, is what the enemy believes.
So they figure as long as they can keep.
So yeah. Now, what you have found, and it's a very interesting discussion. There is a book. I have to find it. I don't remember the name of it. It's one of, if you ever read any of his stuff, the author's name is Jonathan Cahn. He's a Messianic Jew. Okay.
And they're the ones that believe in Jesus, right?
Yes, he's a believing Jew. He still holds to the Jewish culture, but he believes Jesus is Messiah. And he's written a lot of books that talk about what is going on in the U.S. and that kind of stuff.
I've got a copy of the one that every time we stand against Jerusalem, God strikes the United States. Just some kind of disaster. It is.
But
good.
there is one, and I think it's called The Paradigm, I think is what it's called. But it talks about what is going on in Israel now. Okay. So later in Deuteronomy, we're going to hit a point where Moses is going to talk about what's going to happen to them when they fail to obey and then completely turn away from God and all of that. So one of the things that it gets into is the fact that after God removes them from the land, that the land will look cursed and they will think that it looks like a place that God has cursed. Okay. So I gotta make sure I've got these. I apologize if I don't remember all the dates. But in 1868, okay, there were two major events that happened in the Holy Land. Okay, first of all, an American writer did a tour of Palestine, with what it was called at the time. Okay. And then at the same time, a British general named Allenby defeated the Ottomans and defeated the Ottomans and gained rights to the Holy Land. No, I'm trying to remember how all this works because it's kind of weird. Okay. But Allenby did some things there at that time. Then the U.S. writer we know as Mark Twain.
Yeah, I was gonna say, yeah.
Okay. Samuel Clemens. We know him as Mark Twain. And in his pamphlet that he wrote of his journey, he says it looks like a land that God had cursed.
Yeah, I was gonna say it looks that now it's all just dirt.
Okay. So at that same time, and this is how this works. At that same time, the Ottomans, who are a Muslim group or a Turkish group is what it really is, started to allow some Jewish settlers to come in and farm in the Holy Land. You fast forward 50 years, by the way, to the day. Okay. Now, 50 years is an important thing to the Jews. It's called Jubilee.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. And what happens at Jubilee? At Jubilee, things return to the ownership they had before.
Yeah, they get their stuff back. Okay. They get out of slavery.
In 1917, near the end of World War I, the British conquered Israel. Okay. Then we have one that's kind of outside. In 1898, okay, so we go back a little bit, 1898, the first Zionist meeting took place. A Zionist is a Jew who wants the Holy Land back.
Gotcha.
Okay, because the Jerusalem is called Mount Zion. Okay. Exactly 50 years to the day from that meeting, the British gave Israel back to the Hebrews and said, you come here. Okay. But they did not have Jerusalem. Jerusalem was still Palestinian. Okay. So you go back to the 1917 date once again, where the British came in and all of that and took, okay. In 1967, exactly 50 years to the day, is the 6-Day War. Well, the last day of the 6-Day War, Israel took Jerusalem from the Palestinians. That was not originally part of their plan. It just kind of happened. Okay. So then you fast forward 50 years again, another Jubilee. Okay. And in 2017, for the first time in human history since 70 AD, Jerusalem was recognized as the capital of Israel. 2017, Congress and President Trump recognized Jerusalem as the capital of Israel and said, we're gonna move our embassy from Tel Aviv. We're gonna put it in Jerusalem. Okay. So now here's the thing. All of these things moving forward as we see that, there's something else we see from 1868 to 2017 to present. Israel as a nation and as the land has reverted back to what it was before 70 AD. It is now in the hands of the Jews. It is now, there is, and by the way, first time ever in human history that a nation that was completely wiped off the face of the map and scattered to the winds has now come back to the same land. They still have the same language. They still have the same culture. They still have the same
everything.
Right. Okay. Now, So let's deal with what happens between 70 AD and the 1860s. Okay, up until now. Okay, 70 AD, the Romans destroy Jerusalem and scatter the Jews. About 200 years later, the Roman Empire becomes the Christian Roman Empire. The Catholic Church is born and Christianity spreads throughout all the earth. Okay. And up until maybe even 1930, 1940, a lot of those pagan things that had been going on prior to 70 AD in Rome and all of that went away, or at least moved into the shadows. At the same time that Israel has been reverting from a place that is a curse to once again the home of God's people, the rest of the world has been moving from a place of Christianity being a dominant force to what we now call a post-Christian. So Christianity is still there, but how many people just have nothing to do? We are watching as Christianity becomes more and more unpopular and hated and mistreated.
But that's what God says going to happen.
So, but watch. As the Jubilee restores Israel to what it was, the Jubilees have also restored the pagan world back to what it was, in preparation for Christ to return and choose from his and those that aren't his. So there is a level at which we are watching a movement that is very spiritual in nature play out on the world stage. Understand that 50 years ago, there would not have been any way on earth that some of the things that are going on right now in relationship to homosexuality and transgenderism, they would have, it was done in secret.
Yeah. And now it's all in your face and you can't get away from it. And it's super scary.
So understand, we are beginning to look more and more and more and more and more like the world that we see in Revelation. Okay. So guess what? Guess what that means? What that means in the course of, like you said, all these nations flocking. Those that truly trust in God are flocking to Israel to support. But those who are on Balaam's side or on the side of the enemy, they are seeking to somehow escape what they know is coming. Okay. By the way, let's make sure we understand. The devil knows full well what's coming.
That's what, well,
Okay.
I guess he thinks he's going to outsmart him in the end or something.
So the demons that Jesus cast out of that guy, remember, Jesus shows up and they say, wait, you're early. You're not supposed to destroy us yet.
So they knew back then.
And then they say, let us go into these pigs.
Yes.
Don't send us off into eternal darkness. Send us into these pigs.
Yes.
Okay. The demons know what's coming. The devil knows what's coming, but he is the enemy who has so deluded himself that he thinks he can win. I can escape this path that I'm on. Okay. Understand there are things that, and by the way, super kind of on that scary side. Okay. In the last 5 years, what has suddenly become a major world event that we really didn't think would come? Russia is back on the world stage.
Yeah.
Understand that in Ezekiel, it says there will come a day where Russia will launch a surprise attack against Israel. And they will be annihilated by God. God will annihilate them. Okay. Do we understand all of it? No. But I will tell you that it may be another 100 years. It may be another 1,000 years. But what I'm telling you is everything that the Bible says has to happen for Jesus to return has happened.
It's lining out.
And it is creepy as all get out to look at the level at which it has exploded.
Even right down to the whole mark and cardless and everything, just stick your hand on a scanner to scan your everything.
Yeah,
Like,
they'll control what you can buy and get buy.
yeah, I seen a reel about a guy in the UK just wanted to buy a thing of strawberries. They're like, well, if you can't, you got to scan your hand. He's like, here is my exact change. I'm not scanning nothing. And they called the cops on him because he left the money on the table and walked out with the strawberries. It's like, and it's going to get to that point, and it is super scary.
So I mean, but understand the thing that this tells us is what God is still faithful even in the midst of that. Okay.
That's true. And God will still provide for us even in the midst of all that.
All right. So we'll pick up in verse 17 next time.
I didn't mean to get us all
Nope, you're
up
fine.
on the
Verse 17.
Verse 17 of chapter 7.